Welcome to the Phantom Zone.
Hello, and this week's first episode is Onyx. Double X equals double the trouble. Then in spirit, it's time for our annual horror episode as everyone gets possessed by the spirit of the prom-queen. This is the SMALLVILLE Chronicles. Well, hello again. Welcome back. I'm Lou Gonzalez. With me, as always, is Alan Muir.
When was the last time we did one of these?
Like 2 weeks ago. We took like another week off. So, but we are close to the end of season 4. I think we have like another pair of episodes left.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is actually, we have a really good episode and then like a fun filler episode.
Oh, no, we have 4 episodes left.
4 episodes, okay. Dope. But, yeah, this first episode is probably one of the best ones of the series, let alone the season. And it's something that they straight up kind of pull
For Supergirl?
Yeah, for this past season of Supergirl, which I think is not a bad idea at all. But, and it's kind of a callback to the first episode of the season with the Black Kryptonite. Basically, we start off with Lex is doing experiments at Luthor Corp with some doctor who I don't know if we had seen in another episode, but it really doesn't matter. It's just Luthor Corp doctor. And they're doing something where they're heating up kryptonite. And then all of a sudden it goes hotter than they thought it was going to go. And so Lex shoves the doctor out of the way. The kryptonite explodes, turning into black kryptonite, and Lex is irradiated.
He gets shot by in a very, it's sort of like, I'm not saying it's Tron, but that's sort of, that's the only way I can actually think about it.
Yeah, it's that same kind of lighting effect. And basically, so what we get is it splits him. So the one that stands up immediately is, because I don't know if it splits into good and bad Lex. I think it's just Lex and then bad Lex. I can't remember if like they specifically make it that's like a good and a bad, or if it's just like regular and bad. It's mostly more about like that there's a second Lex who is super evil. So
it's there was an episode of Doctor Who from I think 1986 called, like, it was a arc, the trial of the Time Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony Ainley, who played the Master for the rest of the series run, has a line where he says there's evil in all of us, Doctor, even you. So it's like the dark, and that's something that gets brought up later on in the series near the end. However, Clark has a dark side to him.
Yeah, and it's something like we saw in the first episode where there's like the Kal-El and there's like the Clark, and they get merged back, kind of. I think what you're saying is that it's kind of like we have like regular Lex, and kind of like the darkness within him gets kind of sentience.
Yeah.
In what we'll refer to as Alexander, I guess, from this point in the episode. So Lex takes the doctor to the hospital. We cut to the...
and evil Lex is... Usually see his hand, or he gets up from...
behind stuff.
He
gets up from behind stuff and kind of sees them like walking out, and then you're just like, oh. So they don't know, the doctor and Lex don't know that there is another Lex. But Alexander, the evil Lex, does. And so we pop into the hospital where Clark and Chloe are going to go visit Lex, but they run into Alexander. They're like, oh, what happened? And he's like, basically that I'm like super curious. So I think they run into the good Lex, right?
No, they run into Alexander.
Okay, so they run into the bad Lex. He's like, yeah, sure, I'll take you to the lab and show you what I'm doing. Clark's like, okay. And Chloe's like, yeah, I'm going to stay behind and ask the doctor some questions. But before she can go in, Lex goes to him and is like, oh, like, what happened? And asks if there's a way to reverse the process. And scientist asks for his notes from the lab. No, yeah, I think this is like somehow flipped. So they talk.
Alexander's a good one. Lex is a bad one.
Okay. So, yeah, Alexander's a good one. So when Lex, I'm trying to think of it. So let's just go with Blex, as in bad Lex. When Blex goes to go talk to the doctor. He basically is like, oh, there is a way, but I need to like look at my notes. And Blex puts an air into his IV tube and kills him. He leaves the room, and Chloe sees him, and he's like, oh, like, how did you get here? You just left with Clark. And she's like, oh, can I see the scientist? And Blex is like, he's sleeping. Why don't you come back later? And Lex walks away, and then we hear, like, the hospital, there's a code blue, and the scientist is dead. And Chloe's like, what the shit? I just saw Lex walk out of there. So from here, we go to Luthor Corp, and Good Lex is showing Clark around, and is explaining that he's been doing experiments on plants and stuff to try to grow them in harsh environments to end world hunger. And he gives Clark an apple, and then Clark eats it. He's like, oh my God, it tastes terrible. He's like, yeah, that's like the biggest issue we're having. They can stay, but they aren't tasting good. And basically he opens up a container, and there's a bunch of samples, and Clark is like, oh yeah, like I can't stand here. I think I'm getting sick from that apple. And then in the background, we see Blex or Alexander like walking around, overhearing the conversation. And we cut from here to the Luthor mansion, and Good Lex is talking to Lionel about like a charity, and he's like, oh yeah, why don't you have it at like Luthor Corp Plaza and like all this stuff. And Lionel's like, oh, like this newfound generosity is so great. And Lionel leaves, and then Alexander or Blex comes in and cracks him in the head and locks him in the cellar. And he's like, I can't kill you because I don't know what will happen to me if you die. Since I think he's basically like, because you're the original, so he doesn't know what will happen to him as like a sub of him if he was to die.
It's, what was that? Something with in the Iron Mask or something?
The Man in the Iron Mask? Is that what you're talking about? The Leonardo DiCaprio movie?
Was Jeremy Irons in that one too?
Yes.
So then yeah, something like that.
It's the one that's like the, what do you call it? The
identical twins.
Yes, it's based on like a real historical thing that they like play with in like kind of like mythology, that there was like another twin who was a good one and who was like locked in a tower.
Yeah, I was getting that vibes. That type of vibe from this.
So we cut to the torch, and Chloe informs Clark that the scientist died, and they realize that Lex was at the lab and at the hospital at the same time. And then Chloe's like, yeah, let's check out the security tape, and there's 2 Lexes. And so we go from here, and we go to
get something that gets built on, or that more building on previous or in a current story setup.
Yeah, for next season and going forward. So we go to the talent apartment, and we see Lex. Turns out to be Alexander or Blex. And basically just tells her that she deserves better than Jason, and then forces a kiss on her, and it's like, you can be my queen to my kingdom. And Lana slaps him and tells him to get the hell out. And then Alexander's basically like, yeah, well, if you don't be with me, I'm going to close the talent. Destroy this.
This time.
Yeah. Exactly.
I told you that this happens at least 5 times.
It's like the talent getting closed, Chloe dating somebody who turns out to be a villain, everyone, especially Lex, getting head trauma. So we go back to the mansion, and Lex is practicing fencing, and this turns out to be Alexander, of course, because he has the other one locked away. And Lionel comes into the room and asks him how he could invite him to the Luthor Corp Plaza and then cancel everything. And basically, Alexander quotes back to him, because helping those who refuse to help themselves is a waste of time and money, son. And basically tells that to Lionel, as in, quoting back to him. And he's like, yeah, if you can beat me in the fencing thing, then I'll give you the thing back. Otherwise, like, not. And Alexander kind of tortures him and like kind of beats on him until Lionel kind of reverts back to his old self and overpowers Lex. And Lex is just like kind of happy to see that he like showed him that like this whole thing of him being good was a facade.
Yeah.
And so then Clark walks in and is like, what is going on? And then I guess at this point, Alexander knows that Clark is probably in on it, or knows the deal. So he pretends to be the good Lex by talking about the trip to the lab, since he knows about that. And Clark is like, yeah, we saw like that there was a split, and kind of spills the beans. And he's like, why don't we go to the lab? And then there he drops like a giant block on them, hoping to kill them, except Clark obviously blocks it. Chloe, I guess, is knocked out, and he brings her to his house, but Alexander looks on and is like, oh shit, everything I thought is real. And so Clark tries to get Chloe to the hospital, but she's like, I'm fine. How are we able to survive that? And Clark is like, I don't know. He must have like fell into some thing and like kind of brushes it off. And then we go into the barn, and Clark is there, and Alexander confronts him. Who's like, "Don't you understand?" and gives him like a whole Darth Vader to Luke thing. With the two of us, with my mind and your body, like we could rule the universe.
He also mentions some stuff like along the lines of like I'm trying to remember what exactly what is said, but it's along the lines of like Lex would never kill, like Clark says Lex would never kill me or something, and Bad Lex is like no, he hasn't, but he's thought about it.
Yeah, oh yeah, I have it here. It's like he's like, "Where's Lex?" He's like, "You're standing right in front." He's like, "No, you're not him. The real Lex. The real Lex would never try to kill me or Chloe." He's like, "No, you're probably right, but he has thought about it. All the times you meddled in his plans, derailed his ambitions. He's thought about killing all of you. He just never had the guts to go through with it."
And that's just a very that is such a
it's great, and he has another amazing line which we're coming up to. Because after he kind of goes through that, he pulls out, and Clark obviously declines and like grabs him by his throat. Lex does a Batman and pulls a kryptonite ring out of his pocket and puts it on, and just like, "I know your weakness," and like cracks him. And
yeah, he punches him so in the face so hard he just falls off, or he falls back like falls, or
I think he like fall through the railing of the loft, because I feel like they do that stunt all the time in this show.
Yeah, and he's crawling, trying to get back up or trying to get away. Martha and Jonathan come in, see him, and Martha yells, "You're bleeding!" And Lex comes down and said, "I'm guessing that doesn't happen very often." And then we get into the whole thing of
he turns to John, like
Jonathan goes to go near him, but he has the gun out, and like, Lex, what do you want? And he says, "The world, Mrs. Kent, and your son's going to give it to me."
Yeah, and then he ends up shooting Jonathan in the thigh, and then that's where he turns and says, like, "You were right, Mr. Kent. I am the villain of the story." And just like just walks out.
Yeah, it's just like probably like, "You're right about me all along, Mr. Kent. I am the villain of the story." And just and then just cut to black.
Mm-hmm.
Cut that.
It's such a good scene.
It's on. It's like it's always on those lists, those YouTube top so and so moments.
So from here we go to the hospital, and Clark's like, "All right, I need to find the real Lex." So he goes to the mansion. He uses super hearing, finds him in the cellar, frees him. Except Alexander shows up and has the ring on, so he overpowers him. But then Lex jumps on him, so we have like the goofy fight, like for the technology at the time, where it's like they're trying to do a fight between two of the same actor, and it looks really well.
But it doesn't look quite.
It doesn't look horrible, but it looks fine. Then Clark uses his heat vision did they explain? I guess he knows this from. Did Lex tell him this at some point?
Yeah, when they were when Good Lex, where it was talking
at the lab, right?
Yeah, he was telling what happened, like what they're doing, how they were heating up or heating a regular piece of kryptonite and it became black kryptonite.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, he does,
or regular meteor rock, and it turned out to change color and have a different effect.
Yep. So Clark uses his heat vision and turns it into black kryptonite, thus fusing the two of them back together. So we get like our kind of after credit scenes of kind of like this main plot, which is Lex has no memories of what Alexander did or said, so he doesn't remember the secret. He apologizes to Clark and Lana, and he comes back to the mansion, and Lionel's back to his old self, and Lionel's like, "I've seen the error of my ways. Thank you for doing that for me. I closed the charity immediately." Lex is like, "Oh, why did you do that? Like, you shouldn't have done that." But Lionel's like, "A man can't deny his true natures. We're Luthers. And then it ends with Lex kind of having this smirk on his face as Lionel's kind of leaving, and basically kind of showing that like the real Lex is in a much darker place than
everyone thinks.
Yes. So this is definitely one of the best episodes. I think like I kind of ran through it a bit, but like it's because it's not like it's actually unlike a lot of other episodes, it doesn't jump around from like location to location. It's only in like 5 locations, and they're like huge kind of monologue-y things, but they're all so good. And it's basically just an entire episode of Rosenbaum to act at maximum. Like, he's just so good in it.
So just looking at the notes on the SMALLVILLE wiki, this is technically the 4th time that Lex has discovered Clark's secret. The first being in the hug, after the handshake, or the handshake by Bob Berkman made him forget. Then it shattered when Clark did the car trick with Morgan Edge.
Mm-hmm.
So, also, the whole Evil Lex challenging Lionel to a fencing duel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many like
there was
things
a bit
in this.
It was an inverse of Hothead.
Yeah, from the pilot episode.
No, not the pilot. It was one of the first few episodes. It was like when
it was the coach, wasn't it? That was Hothead.
Yeah, but in that episode, Lionel challenged Lex.
Mm-hmm. But there's like a ton of stuff because it's like it parallels like the stuff that we've seen with their like Warrior Angel stuff. The coolest thing is I think some of his lines to Clark are like very similar to the stuff that like Batman says in Dark Knight Returns when he's like, for all the things like I'm just a guy, like I'm just a human and I beat you,
or beaten by a mortal.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Evil Lex says to Clark that if they like if we team together, we can rule this world like gods among men. Another direct reference to the message in the ship and from Rosetta. And the scene I just mentioned, joining together and ruling the world, is got a parallel to Ryan.
Yeah, there's like so many like things that they pulled from because I'm like looking through. It's like they like pulled one of the lines is like from a Megadeth song, like when he says like "Hello, me, meet the real you." You're right that they do stuff about the man, the Iron Masks, and he references it. And this is the first time, although we see like a ton in the show, like the kryptonite ring comes back again and again and again, which makes sense. It's always a thing in the comics between like Batman and Lex. Although Batman tends to have like the kryptonite brass knuckles, which are also awesome.
Also, I just remembered, actually, Lex wouldn't be able to close his Talon.
Yeah.
Because what happened in the previous in season 3.
Yeah, because he like
he did a special clause that would make sure if he was like not himself, he wouldn't. It would be null and void.
Yeah, although I feel like he could always there's ways to get around that. But yeah, I give this. I'd have to say like it's hard to like talk about like this episode is so good and it's all Rosenbaum. Although what's his name is amazing as Lionel in this because he gets to give like the kind of two separate. Glover is awesome, but this is like an A+ episode for me. Oh, I like this would probably be one of the episodes I would tell someone to watch.
This is one of the top 10 of the series.
Mm-hmm.
And you really there's no need to know like everything. You know who's who. There's no like. I mean, thank God, nothing against Jensen Ackles, but thank God he wasn't on this episode because
it's really a small cast because
it's Lionel.
It's the main cast and that's it.
Yeah, it's the main cast.
Yeah, they get like the doctor and like random people in the hospital, but that were like barely in it. Yeah, it's like 50% of this episode is Lex, and then it's like Clark and Chloe, and then like one scene with Lana, and then the two scenes with Lionel, and the one scene with the Kents, and that's it. It's why like this episode is way different because we don't jump around from like location to location compared to like the next episode. Although it's not a terrible episode, it is a definite like location jumping and character jumping where we meet like 500 people. So do we have anything else to say on Onyx or should we move on to Spirit?
I will say this. Every now and again when I'm feeling emotional and need to calm myself down or man up, I play that clip of Lex doing that epic monologue.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, let's move on to Spirit.
So this is like, I'm trying to think. I think we get most seasons like a kind of Halloween-y, spooky episode. So this is kind of the season's version of it.
We already had that. We had the the stuff we can't talk about because it's
the Charmed episode.
yeah.
Yeah, that one's more goofy. This is more like classic horror thing because there's murder and stuff. So we do the classic kind of like horror thing where we open at the end of the episode. So we have Lifehouse, the actual band, performing their big song. And basically we see Chloe breaking a fire axe out and going after Jonathan Kent. And then through dumbness, almost burning down the school while her makeup is running down her face. And then we cut to one day earlier. So Lana is talking about an article that Chloe wrote, basically tearing down the idea of having a prom queen, saying it's just a popularity contest. And Lana is like, yeah, I think I might skip the prom. But Chloe's like surprised. And Lana's like, I don't really want to show up with a guy who got fired for who was a coach in the school, like as my date. And she's like, yeah, that makes sense. And she's like, well, why don't you just go with me and we'll just go together. Cut to like around the corner, our villain of the week, Dawn Styles, goes up to Chloe and is like, blah, 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 blah. I'm so mad. I'm the head of the plastics. It's very Mean Girls like set up with her little group, and she's all in pink. Who's the star? Who's the head Mean Girl in that? It's a famous actress. Oh my god, I can't think of her name right now. She's in Doctor Strange. Played the night nurse. Can't remember her name.
She's also in About Time.
Yes, and Sherlock Holmes, which I just watched the other day, and just super good. Can't remember her name right now. She's from The Notebook or whatever. Basically, Dawn is super annoyed about it because she's a front runner, and Chloe's like, "Yeah, well, you can suck it. I don't care if you win."
Rachel McAdams.
Yes, Rachel McAdams. She's very much like that character from Mean Girls. So Chloe's like, "Well, whatever. I don't care. Suck it." And she's like, "You don't get it. Like, you've been nominated, so you're my competition." And Chloe's like, "Wait, what?" And yeah, it's kind of where we leave it. And then we go to Lex and his security team are like on the grounds of the Luther Mansion. They're like, "Yeah, so we found a body." And then Jason appears out of nowhere. He's like, "Hey, what's going on?" And then like, "What's everybody doing?" "Oh my god, is that the body of Bridget Crosby?" "Oh no." Which, if you don't remember, Bridget Crosby is the non-wife partner of Dr. Swan, played by former Lois Lane.
May she rest in peace.
Mm-hmm. Yes, maybe both. And so basically, she gets off on the show off camera, and all we see, I think, is an arm sticking out of the ground. Can't remember if it's an arm or a leg, but we just see like one appendage. So we go back to the torch, and Clark is waiting for Chloe, and she's kind of like, "This is kind of hilarious that I got nominated. I don't understand what's going on." Clark's like, "Actually, you're kind of leading in the stuff because people like that you're like the anti-prom queen." And she's like, "Oh, it's kind of nice to kind of do it," and asks who he's taking to prom. And Clark's like, "I don't know, I'm probably not going to go." And she's like, "Oh, that's dumb. Why aren't you going?" And she's like, high school is about to end, and basically all of them are kind of in this weird space. And she's like, "If I'm willing to go on stage and get a sash, and then you and Lana are going to sit at home, like, how did we get to this point?" So then we got to Dawn and her buddies are talking about the prom at the Talon, and her boyfriend is talking to another girl, and Dawn's like, telling him to do stuff, and he turns around and dumps her. And she's like, "It doesn't matter. I'll just get a new prom king." And then on her way home, she's looking at the yearbook for potential dates. She notices Clark because he was the captain of the football team, and then crashes her car off of a gorge and basically eats it onto a pile of meteor rocks. It's actually, I thought it was hysterical, like how hard they made her, like she should be like destroyed, but she basically is. But she lands on meteor rocks, so that obviously has some effect. And then kind of no one finds her, and then night kind of comes, and Dawn stumbles up to the road, and she flags down a vehicle, which is Martha Kent, except the car drives right through her, and then the purple mist kind of swirls, and then Martha stops the car, and Dawn's like looking around, and then she realizes that she's inside Martha's body. So we have a ghost situation. So Clark comes home that night, and this is actually, I think, a really funny scene. It is like really creepy, but hilarious at the same time. And this is kind of the second time this season that we've had the Clark and Martha kind of weirdness, like sexual tension. Is that like, so Clark comes home and Martha's like dancing and eating ice cream, and she's like acting really ditzy. And she's like, "Do you have a date to the prom?" And Clark's like, "Mom, I told you I'm not going." And Martha gets upset, saying, "You can't go. Like, it's important that you don't miss it." Clark is like confused. And she's like, "Why don't you go with me?" And then, "You're going with Dad as a chaperone?" And
the whole scene is just weird.
But it's very similar to like it's reverse of the Lionel and Clark.
Yeah,
that was like my point. So it's like, oh, it's a second scene this season of like Martha and Clark having like this weird tension. But then Lois comes down the stairs and Martha's like, "Oh, I guess you're taking her." And Lois and Clark look at each other. "Are you drunk?" And she basically stomps off and Clark's like, "Do you want to ride to work?" And she's like, "No, I'll go on my own." And it's like very much in that kind of tone. So Martha goes to Talon just as Lana comes out of her apartment and it's like, "Oh, why aren't you on the decorating committee?" And Lana's like, "I'm not going to the prom." Martha's like really like rude about it. And she's like, "Lana, you think you're above everything." And Lana gets upset and turns to go, except Martha grabs her shoulder and Dawn's spirit then jumps into Lana. And she's like, "Oh, I'm in a better thing." So now Lana leaves and Martha's like, "Where am I and what just happened?"
Clark comes in before Lana leaves and she says, "Do you have a date to the prom?" And she's like, and Clark's like, "What about Jason?" And he's like, he's not a problem anymore. and they just end up. He's like, "Okay."
Yeah,
and
he's just like,
"How'd I get here?"
Yep. And so, yeah, Martha has no idea how she got there. Lana goes to the school to like help volunteer. She sees Billy and asks him about his breakup. And he says he's glad Dawn isn't around. Alana gets upset, but then like flirts with him. Obviously, it's what the hell is her name inside of her? Dawn. And it's like, oh, it's upset, but kind of then flirts with him. And she tells him to get cleaned up and she'll meet him in the shower, I think, or something. Clark shows up at the school and asks Chloe if she's seen Lana. And he tells Chloe that his mom doesn't remember. And then like until she saw Lana, and then Lana started acting weird. And then Lana electrocutes the dude in the locker room. And he starts to obviously convulse because he's being electrocuted. Clark goes into the locker room and like saves Billy, but sees Lana leaving. He goes to approach her, but Dawn is jumping like body to body to body to body until she finds her friend Harmony and is there. And Lana's like, "I have no idea what's going on. I don't even know how I got here or why I would hurt Billy. I don't even know who that is." And this is when Chloe and they all put together the idea that Dawn is jumping from body to body and that the last thing Martha remembers is driving near Carlton Gorge. And they find out that Dawn's in a deep coma in the hospital after being found there, which has the highest concentration of meteor rock. So they're like, "Oh no." So they go to check on Billy and they get an update on Dawn. And basically it shows that Harmony is walking up into Dawn's room and Lana feels guilty for whatever she did to John, and Clark admits that she asked him to prom, and they both agree that since she wasn't herself, it doesn't really count. A nurse catches Harmony in Dawn's room and she basically comes out to report that Dawn died because I believe Harmony like smothered. Yeah. So, because I think she tries to jump into her own body and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And she's also like really wrecked. I think they kind of allude to the fact that she's like in really bad shape. So Lois is at the hospital and then she ends up jumping from, I think, the nurse into Lois. And then Jonathan and Martha are preparing to go to the prom. Clark's hope he doesn't regret it. And then basically Martha's like, "You're not going because you can't go with Lana." And she's like, "Well, I rented a tux just in case if you want to change into it." Just as they leave, Lois shows up in a giant pink dress. And it says that Clark is going to take her to the prom whether he likes it or not. Because I don't think he yet realized that it's Dawn and Lois. From here, we go back to the Jason thing. So he's hacking Lex's email, finds a message that he was supposed to be meeting Miss Crosby the same day when the body was found. Lex catches him and Jason's like, "Where's the artifact that says you mentioned it?" And Lex like, "I'm not answering your questions. Don't threaten me." Jason's like, "I'm going to go tell the cops where the body was found." And basically he goes and the cops show up with Sheriff Adams. and there's nothing there. And there's now a gazebo there. But basically, she announces that there isn't anybody like on record living anywhere that's actually named Bridget Crosby, that she even existed. And basically, Jason's like freaking out that this is a total cover up, and he goes to call his mom and reports that everything went as planned. Lex took care of the body, and then it shows that he actually has I think it's the air stone. I don't remember. It's the black stone that Lionel had earlier. So basically, at this point, Jason is full on evil bad guy and in on the plan. This is where it's like super confusing about like how Jason is involved, because now he's just like completely involved. So Clark and Lois go to the prom, and Chloe's like, "I'm surprised you guys are here." And he's like, "I decided to come because I wanted to see you win." And the music stops, and it's announced that Chloe won. So Lois gives her a hug, obviously flipping from Lois to Chloe, and then people don't notice, and then the prom king, like, we never find out who that is, and Lois goes to Clark, why am I here and why am I dressed like this? And Clark's like, oh shit. So Clark is like, Chloe's obviously possessed. So Chloe gets her crown and has like this weird speech and is like super enthusiastic how it's been my dream and how Dawn deserves the crown, blah blah, she died, and the crowd's like booing. They're like, screw Dawn, she sucks. And then so Chloe, with Dawn and her, gets angry, storms off.
And we then cut to the beginning of the episode.
Yes. So she pushes Jonathan down and she wants to set the school on fire because no one appreciates her.
She's just gonna take everyone with her.
Yeah. So Clark finds his dad and is like, explains what's going on. And he stops her from starting a fire. And then he's like basically telling Dawn that like, yeah, let Chloe go, you gotta go. She grabs him to try to go into Clark's body, and Chloe's restored, but then Clark takes the tear off of her head and then pushes her across the room. And then, because it's Dawn inside of him, and then Jonathan uses a meteor rock to incapacitate Clark and then forces Dawn's spirit out. And with Chloe knocked out, she kind of has like nowhere to go. And then she kind of just like disappears. Like, it's very like, okay, we kind of don't have a real way to end this. It's basically like, oh, she has nowhere to go immediately, so she's not just gone. And then so Clark helps Chloe up and gives her back her tiara and is like, here you go, because you are the prom queen, you deserve your moment. They go back to their prom, and Lois is like, all right, I think I know what happened. And Clark's like, would you like to dance? And he's just like, she's like, no, because I know the person you really want to dance with, and she's over there. So Clark and Lana have a dance, and Chloe kind of looks on kind of sad, and she admits to Lois that it still hurts, that it's like kind of a reminder of, was like season 1, right? When Clark ditched her at the spring formal.
She says, feels like yesterday I've been that nervous freshman on the dance floor. And Lois is saying that, is telling Chloe that all of this is going to seem like a lifetime ago, and that you're going to be going like doing big things in Metropolis at the planet, and like saying that Clark Clark won't be anything, and with her knowing how Clark really is, she says something along the lines of I wanted to say it's I'm trying to remember. It was something along the lines of Clark is going to be like, he's going to have a bigger role than you think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the final thing we kind of get at the end of the episode is that Jason walks in and sees Clark and Lana dancing, and he's like huffs off, which kind of goes into the next couple of episodes. So I would say this episode
this is, I think, the middle of the trilogy of Lifehouse and Smallville. Oh
yeah, they have like 4 songs in this episode.
Yeah, the Undone, Blind, Come Back Down, You and Me. The one that played during the pilot, Everything, ends up getting played.
What's their big song?
Yeah, it plays the pilot, the first season, at the end of the first season, when Whitney and Lana have their dance at the school, and then ironically, I know I always bring this up, it is the song that is played throughout Homecoming, where Brainiac 5 is doing it, and It's a Wonderful Life for Clark.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I would say just to go like on a grading thing, I give this like a C. Like it's fine. It has some funny moments, but otherwise, it's kind of just like it's weird. It's weird because it's a throwaway, except for the stuff with Jason and Lex, which is like 2 scenes. But it does kind of like set up a whole bunch of stuff. And I think it's kind of similar in many ways to the next episode, which is like also kind of throwaway, but also has weirdly like huge ramifications, like plot wise. So our next pair of episodes is Blank, which is like a funny one when once the doesn't know who he is, just like in our opening episode. And then Ageless, which is like one of the most depressing episodes of the series.
Yeah, but how we all grow old and die.
Yeah. So here is a couple of clips from that.
Oh wait, can I just give some background of where we are in the episodes in terms of the clips?
Yes.
We are in the beginning, or not necessarily the beginning. We are from Clark entering the Talon to Lois finding that someone took all the money from the register, to Clark super speeding in front of the car and losing his memory. And then with Ageless, or not Ageless, Ageless, it's a take on, it's not a take, it's Chloe basically giving some support to Clark, saying go get him, Speedy. So.
All right, well, you can check those out right here.
Clark? What happened?
Who's Clark?
On the outskirts of town, in the middle of nowhere. Why would Lon and Evan be way out there?
The windmill.
The one in Chandler Field? Go get him, Speedy.
All right, and I guess that just about does it. So don't forget to check out all the other podcasts and to rate, review, and subscribe. So Thursdays is usually the comic show. Then we have like the regular Phantom Zone show or Legion reviews that we've been doing, or After Darks. There was a new episode of Legion of Tunes that came out like a week or 2 ago. Check that out at loshorror.podcast.com. And you also have Los Horror Games there. So check that out. There's been a bunch of new stuff coming out. Not sure what you've been talking about with your newest episode. I know I actually just beat Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 yesterday.
Well, ironically, we didn't record.
All right. So then I guess just go check it out. Check out all the articles. There's tons of amazing articles. Again, it's loshorror.wordpress.com. There's tons of other podcasts, and check out all those. Again, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Those reviews and ratings really help on iTunes. And tell a friend. That's probably the most important thing. Get the word out. And we will catch you guys next time. I am Lou Gonzalez.
I'm Alamira. This podcast stands for truth, justice, and, well, making sure that mean girls do not win.
And maybe sing Smallville in the Arrowverse.
Possibly.
Fingers crossed. All right. Adios.